Okay, welcome to Hacking Self-Storage. I have just been on the podcast with AJ Osborne. AJ runs the Self-Storage Income Podcast. He's also got a book out called Growing Wealth in Self-Storage. He's got his AJ Osborne podcast. He's got 13 facilities. What this guy doesn't know about self-storage is beyond me. It was an incredible interview. The only small problem is that I've moved offices and my internet hasn't been stable during this whole podcast. And please, there's a couple of seconds where it just cuts out. But I promise you, if you put up with that, you will learn so much from this individual. I talk about when I first came across AJ at a show. I literally, because I learned so much and appreciated him so much, I went out and bought him a bottle of champagne on the Vegas Strip, and it cost an absolute bloody fortune just to say thank you, because I learned so much. I took down so many notes. He has literally changed the way I look about self-storage. And if I can probably say he's one of, if not the biggest mentors I have in this industry. I massively look up to him, everything he does. And it was an honor and a privilege to get him on this podcast. We finally did it. There was a few dates that I couldn't do, a few dates that he couldn't do. And yeah, after a long time, we finally got on the podcast together, and it is really, really good. And I'm sure that you guys will learn an awful lot from it. And he goes through his injuries, what he had, his illness, and just listen to it. It is, as you can tell, I am a big fanboy of this guy, and you'll enjoy it. You'll enjoy this podcast, and I'm just so sorry and frustrated that sometimes the internet connection wasn't great, but we move on. And I'm sure that you'll get plenty of value, tons of value out of this episode. I could talk to this guy all day. Okay, my friends, shut up, Dean, and get on with it. Let us listen to AJ. Okay, here is Mr. AJ Osborne. Mr. AJ Osborne, welcome to Hacking Self-Storage, buddy. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yours has been the podcast that I have been looking forward to come on forever. And so I'm so glad we've tried so many times to arrange this. I'm so glad that we got this down, and thank you for having me on.
Oh man, it's my absolute pleasure. You was one of the people that I had to get on this podcast. So for people who don't know who you are, AJ, can you just tell the listeners a bit about you, what you do, and give us a glimpse into the AJ lifestyle?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am an absolute self-storage nerd. I love the industry. I started in the early 2000s, small storage facilities in third-tier markets, so smaller cities, and we grew that through the recession, the Great Recession, and we do everything from build, we do conversions. So I bought office buildings, bankrupt retail centers, ground up storage developments. We were one of the first people with Travis, who you have on, who's also a business partner of mine. We rolled out the keyless entry systems that you've got, you're using now, no key. We have them on multiple facilities that we're doing. I'm also an owner of Tenant Inc., the software system that's supposed to integrate with a lot of these things. So I do a lot in storage. I sit on the board of the co-op, so that Travis represents, that you had on. And I'm also pioneering the brand name, so trying to do a national. So I love this industry. I think it's just an amazing industry. I have the best-selling book in storage right now, and that's been a weird thing because I'm dyslexic, so I didn't think that I'd be writing a book. Two, I didn't think there were so many people. Investor's Guide to Growing Wealth and Self-Storage. I didn't think there was that many people that were like super interested in storage, but I've been really blown away by this industry that Damien, you live in. I have kind of a unique, I think, story. And I do a lot of speaking and things that I think that, the reason why is, of course, everybody's interested in self-storage too, but I like to say that self-storage saved my financial life. And I mean that literally, because I became paralyzed and was actually fired from my job while I was paralyzed in the hospital. Wow. And so my self-storage facilities that I owned at the time, they paid the bills. They made it so we could survive and live. And of course, I didn't go back to getting a job. I just kept going in storage and decided this is obviously the right place to be. This is what we should be doing. And we've been expanding since then. So I started Cedar Creek Wealth, which is it's more of the syndication part, right? You get investors, people like that. And we're all over the United States as of now. We haven't left the United States. I've looked at other countries. I used to live in Brazil, so I'm very interested in Brazil, Canada, the UK. Those are really interesting markets to me because right now we're at the precipice of storage, right? Like storage was this underground thing in the United States. It was this new real estate asset class. But right now in the United States, it's the belle of the ball. And I'm really interested in outside, particularly the United States, where this asset class is still more new, right? It's still coming up. It hasn't been around like it has in the United States, and it hasn't taken hold. So self-storage as an industry is in a super interesting spot. As far as the life cycle of the asset class, it's an adolescent. It's no longer a newborn, right? But it's not fully grown. The vast majority of all these assets are owned by mom and pops, right? In fact, 70% of all assets in self-storage are owned by mom and pops, which creates an amazing landscape for investors and people, entrepreneurs that want to start self-storage businesses, because there's actual acquisition targets to go out and get. And when you're looking at that, particularly in other countries like Canada, right, or even the UK or even Brazil, those assets were primarily developed and built by families. And REITs were slower to get into those markets, and they're coming in now. But I love this industry and this asset class just because of its history, where it's going, and the future of it. We've been through a lot. 2008, we've had the Great Recession, right? After 2000, really 8, 9, 10, it lasted a long time. Then we had COVID. If you look at all the real estate assets and their performance, and the drivers behind why those real estate assets are performing well, a lot of those fundamental philosophical views on asset performance and valuation have been shaken to the core. Everything from single family homes that in America we thought were basically like owning a gold bar, right? Like it could never go down. That turned out to be totally false. Retail used to trade, their retail center real estate bonds used to trade like flipping treasuries notes, right? It was just, they were so solid. And now retail, nobody wants to touch. You have hotels that have just been demolished by COVID. You have multifamily housing where governments have just basically said you can't even collect rent anymore. We've seen this weird world of government intervention like we've never seen in the history, right? Between 2008, all of the mass printing in every single country, the central banks all going to work, and what we've seen happen through Greece and Italy and what has had to happen have shaken some of the fundamentals and the premise of why people invested in real estate. Throughout all of that, self-storage has done incredible. And it's amazing to think about what we've all been through in the last 15 years and to think of how storage has performed and what it's done. And people are opening up their eyes and they're kind of shocked by it, to be honest.
Do you know what, AJ? This is why I wanted you on. I just stopped taking notes. There's loads of strands I can go down. First of all, I just want to tell the listeners how I first came across you. And it was in 2018. You were speaking in Vegas. And I'll be honest, there was a football match going on in the Champions League, which is the pinnacle of a football season. And it was my team, Man City versus Liverpool. And I only planned on watching and listening to you for 15 minutes. And I honestly, the rest of the speakers, yeah, it was okay. I learned little bits here and there. And so when I came to your presentation, I thought, yeah, it'd be all right, 15 minutes. Never came across you before. And honestly, AJ, I was gripped from the moment you started talking. I don't want to sound like a fanboy, but I've been in touch with you ever since and just said, oh my God, I've learned so much from you. Thank you so much. That was amazing. And it genuinely was. You went through your illness, how it started, what happened. And then you started telling about self-storage. You set it up beautifully, how self-storage has really helped you financially during that time. Could you just tell the listeners a little bit about what happened and with your illness and how you got into self-storage then?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. You know, it's a weird thing. It came out of the blue, first of all. So what had happened to me is I was living the good life, right? Everything was going great. We'd been investing in storage. I worked for a huge benefits brokerage firm, which I don't even know if you have those there. We don't have, we have privatized insurance, and that's a big deal here. That was uh, going great. In fact, I was down in California. Me and my wife, we just had a newborn baby. I have 4 children, and we just had our fourth, who's 3, 4 months old. Out of the blue, I got sick. My legs started hurting, and we got home. I went to the hospital, and they're like, "There's nothing wrong with you. You're as fit as a fiddle." I got home and just went soaked my legs because I was just in a lot of pain and I couldn't stop it. We put the kids to bed, and then I went to get out of the bathtub, and I couldn't walk. My legs stopped functioning. My wife pulled me out of the tub, rushed me to the car. We had somebody come when the kids were sleeping, take care of the kids, and rushed me to the hospital. Within a few days, the rest of my body stopped working, and they put me into a coma, and I woke up out of the coma on life support. I was paralyzed from the head down, so I was a quadriplegic, and I was hooked to tubes. I couldn't breathe, talk, nothing. And I sat there, for months, in excruciating pain. I couldn't even sleep because what had happened is all my nerves had been destroyed. So it's something called Guillain-Barré. I'd never heard of this before. I didn't know anything about it. Basically, my white blood cells started to attack a virus. They started to overproduce massively because they identified my central nervous system as a threat. And then all my white blood cells started to attack my central nervous system and cut my brain off from my body. And so I became paralyzed. It happens randomly. It's not a disease. It's not even something you catch. We call it a trigger. Like, it gets triggered, and it happens to 1 in a million, I think, something like that. So, I'm just that lucky. And so it happened that way. And I got to the hospital, and I didn't even say goodbye to my kids. Right. And I was on life support, and my wife, she sat beside me, took care of me, and I sat there for months. I was let go 2-3 months after going into the hospital from my job. They didn't know I was ever going to leave. So it was like, oh, you're going to go. And then I ended up leaving after about 4 months, I believe, in a wheelchair. I had to regain the use of my hands, extensive physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, all of it. And, it was an interesting time because it's not just a time, even yeah, I lost my job, but really I lost myself, right? I lost this idea of who I was. The job on top of it is the cherry on top because, that's also part of your identity. And it was an industry I'd been in my whole entire life. And it's all I knew that in storage, nothing else. And so it was going home. There was nothing they could do for me. There was nothing that anybody really had for me to even do. It was just go home and hope you get better. I went to physical therapy, but they're like, we hope your body comes back. Will it? We don't know. I got out of my leg braces last year officially. So they thought physical therapy, I was told that I would never walk without braces or anything again. I stopped going to physical therapy, and I just went home and took care of my kids and started working again. And so I started working in a wheelchair. I actually started 2 companies out of a wheelchair. And I just went back to going full steam. Life is normal when I could. I had to deal with extreme pain. I could only function for very short periods of time. For a long time, my body couldn't handle anything, but it's just been one step at a time coming back over the last 3+ years. I'm extremely fortunate, extremely blessed that I can walk again. I can't run. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying. So that's my big goal this year, is to be off all our pain medication to reduce my pain. So we're going through massive pain treatments, and it's to be able to run again. I want to be able to go run with my kids. But if that happens, great. If not, you know what, listen, we could not be more happy that I'm sitting here talking to you today. It was a really touch and go for a long time. We had 6 weeks where we didn't know if I was ever going to be able to get off the tubes.
Yeah, man. And in 2018, when obviously just towards the end of this, when you did your presentation, my lasting memory of you, buddy, is, I don't think I've ever said this to you, when at the end of your presentation, there was so many people crowding around you. And obviously you was in a lot of pain still, and you was standing up on some crutches, and you talked to every single person there, buddy. And ever since that point, I thought, what a guy. I've got the utmost respect for him, because obviously it was difficult for you, but you didn't want to let anybody else down, and you was literally answering every single person's questions. And because it was such a good bloody presentation, there were so many people there trying to talk to you. So I thought I was brilliant, buddy.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I was really in a hurry to make sure that I was sitting in the hospital and the snow was coming down, and I was looking out, and it was Christmas. So I went in when it was still warm outside. And it was Christmas, and I was sitting there, and I was thinking about, Christmas morning, the hospital was going to let me go home for they gave me 2 or 3 hours that I could go home on Christmas morning to see my kids. It was my first time being home in months. Wow. And I was so excited to go home. Right. And I'm looking out, and I'm wondering, and I'd already lost my job and everything. And I'd was wondering, what are my kids going to get for Christmas? They're going to be so excited, because I didn't know, because my wife was handling all that. But I realized that at the time, I'm not worried about losing my house. I'm not worried about, having to take my kids out of school, and what are we going to do for money, and how's my wife going to do this? 4 kids, brand new baby. I wasn't worried about those things. And I think it was really at that point where I realized this is really important. And people need to understand that, we need to be in control of our financial life. And it is not just, people think, oh, it's just money. It's not. This is about freedom. And this is about freedom to do and live your life the way you see fit. And that I became very strong and passionate about that. And I thought, I'm not going to let anybody or anything prohibit me. So even if I'm doing miserable or whatnot, I'm going to go up and do it. In fact, I was at a conference in Colorado I was speaking at, and this was last February. And I started to go during the conference, like into shock. I had developed, because I couldn't walk right, my bones were hitting each other, and it had created an infection inside me. And I didn't know this. And my body started shutting down. I'm shaking everything. So they rushed me to the hospital. They hooked me up to IVs, everything else like that. I'm in there. And the next day I was supposed to speak that night. And so I told the doctor, I'm like, all right, listen, you can keep me as long as you want. But I'm leaving here at 5 o'clock, whether you like it or not. And so what they did is they actually took the IV bags. We hooked them onto my arm, taped them onto my arm. I put a coat over the top. I went and spoke, and then I went back to the hospital. So afterwards, nobody even knew. I just went and spoke with IV bags in my arms, and then went to my thing and went back. And, I think that kind of, I guess that's how you just got to approach these things. And it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be right. And there's always going to be a million excuses. And when sitting there in the hospital, I knew that I had it. I had every excuse now in the world to stop, to not do anything again. And to me, it was like, I can either make the choice to do it or not. And every little choice will be to do it. When I was starting walking again, and my son was like, Dad, I want you to hold me. And it hurt to walk. And so every step that I would take, and I'd have to use cane and my leg braces. And he would say, Dad, I want you to hold me and to walk like you used to. Put the cane down and hold me. And instead of telling him, no, that hurts, I can't do that, I'm like, no, I'm just going to sit here and suffer. And I loved every single second of it. And I'd put my cane down and walk, and my wife would walk next to me and try not to let me fall. And I'd hold him like he was used to. And, it was those kind of things, I think, that helped me get better. It was those kind of things that said, listen, it's going to suck. It's going to be painful. But that's okay. It's not like I'm not special that I shouldn't, for some reason, not have pain. I'm not special that for some reason I shouldn't have bad things happen to me. life doesn't work that way. It's not fair. So just move on and do what you need to do, no matter what was happening. And that was just kind of the mentality I took from it. Like I could either do that or go the other way. And going the other way was a real possibility and that scared me of who I could become.
Yeah. Do you know what, AJ? There is absolutely no stopping you. And I just wanted to publicly say, man, I appreciate you for all the content you put out, everything you do, and that resilience that you show, buddy. I absolutely know that you're helping people long beyond self-storage as well, with that attitude, that mentality as well. And yeah, I think it's brilliant. So onto Keylock Storage, buddy, onto the storage. So how many sites do you actually have now then?
So I have 13 sites. Our average site is 85,000, 90,000 square feet. We are currently developing 2 ground up. We have 2 conversions, and we have 3 more. So we have about 450,000 square feet under contract right now. And we have right about 1.4, 1.5 million total square feet that we own and run across 7, 8 states.
Wow, that is impressive, buddy. And how was COVID?
We own, operate, we manage.
Yeah. And how has COVID affected you guys in America then at the minute in terms of self-storage?
Yeah. So yeah, COVID, it had a interesting effect on our portfolio, our revenues, our employment. In the United States, we're because we're spread across multiple states, the states have their own individual rights. And that created an interesting situation, which I'm sure everyone's seen on the news, that, our cases are crazy, right? And one of the reason is because there was not necessarily a coordinated effort. And because of how our country's set up, there couldn't be, right? So we had some states that when they went down and they went into lockdown, it was like, you're shutting your doors, as in you can't even open, there's no social distancing, nothing. It's just, it's done. And then there's other states that took basically little to no action. Now, when it first started, it was very scary times. Obviously, as we all know, the original projections and things that were coming out with COVID were terrifying. Our employees were terrified. And we didn't know what the governments were going to do. We didn't know what, and that's how everybody felt. So we saw an immediate dip in revenue. Immediately, first 3 months. Well, excuse me. We knew that a dip was coming. So the first 2 months we were fine, but we knew because it was tailing in storage as people moved out, we weren't replacing.
Yes.
And that was during the busy season. And we weren't having mass move in. So we were like, okay, we're going to fill this. So we felt it. It wasn't anything crazy, wasn't anything dramatic, but we did. Our big concern was we're not filling up. During the slow season, we're going to be stuck now, and then we're going to go lower. And that was our big fear. But actually what happened here in the United States was that didn't happen. What happened is we had that dip in the summer, and then our busy season turned into the fall. So all of a sudden the fall was crazy busy. And I mean, we were looking at some of our facilities and they were up 6,000 a month, literally 2 months ago. And in states that were like Washington, that were much more severe and strict on their lockdowns, things like that, we didn't get nearly the bounce back. But all in all, I mean, we did. I don't want to say it didn't hurt us or didn't hit us. We did. We had a dip, but in the middle of COVID, we refinanced $35 million portfolio, got great rates, non-recourse. And we that was on the cusp of the CMBS markets, the collateralization markets. So markets that you put debt together and collateralize and sell it off, which allows you to have non-recourse debt, which means I'm not personally liable, which is the golden goose of real estate, because you get your cake and eat it too. Those markets kind of shut down for a little bit worldwide, right? Most all of those instruments are built out of Wall Street. And as we know, New York was hit super hard in the United States, right out of the gate. They had and continue to have problems there. And they were extraordinarily locked down. So those debt markets started to seize and freeze, but it was very quick. And they opened up, but when they opened up, this was the thing. They're like, okay, we're not doing hotels, we're not doing anything else, but we'll do storage. And so we immediately refinanced and we kept going and moving. We had a slowdown, bounced right back up. And I don't want to say it's same old, but same old. Not much has really changed.
Yeah, do you know what? We mirrored you exactly. We lost 3 years of growth in literally 3 months because exactly like you, we had loads of move outs, but nobody moved in. And I was thinking exactly the same. We're coming into the Christmas period, into the quarter 3 and quarter 4. It's going to be a struggle. But the exact opposite happened. It flip-flopped, it turned around. And our summer period was our winter period. Our winter period was our summer period. We was gaining,
yep,
exactly like you, 6,000 square foot per quarter. I mean, you did it in 1 month, but we was 6,000 square foot per quarter. It was incredible how busy it was, and we've continued to be that busy even now, January and February, which is unheard of for us at this time. So my sisters are in the wedding industry and they've been absolutely decimated by COVID because we in the UK can't have any weddings. Last year, the weddings were restricted to 30 people, so everybody cancelled. And so I kind of feel really, really guilty, but really, really blessed that we've been in this industry, and we're so lucky because we didn't choose this industry because of COVID. We chose this industry for other reasons, but we just got COVID lucky. And so I do feel very, very blessed. In terms of automation then, AJ, what's your view on automation, and how many of your sites are automated? How many of your sites have no key technology?
So automation is this interesting thing that's going on in the space. And, when we look at automation, it comes in multiple tiers. So as you know, self-storage is kind of broken up into 3 tiers. You have small, mid-sized, large facilities. So let's call a small really under 40,000 square feet. Let's call a mid-size 40 to 70, right? And then 70,000 plus square feet is pretty much anything large, which can go up to 250,000 plus, right? That's not normal, right? But it can. As of right now, most of the REITs average square footage is right around 80,000 square feet, maybe 75. So the small facilities in our industry have this mass need where they have to be automated because the labor expense associated with them, it makes no sense whatsoever. You just can't make it work anymore. And labor is increasing in price. I don't know what it's doing over there, but cost to build and labor's skyrocketing. So small facilities, they just can't make it. So I think that automation is 100% has to happen. But when you get into the big facilities, automation doesn't cut it alone. So we have automation at 3 facilities, but none of them are manless, right? So we have employees at all of them because we couldn't, there's no way. The facilities wouldn't even operate without them. You're talking 130,000 square feet with over 1,000 tenants, people driving through buildings, right? It's a different story. So when we look at automation, it really changes in the industry how and where you're looking at it and where that automation is utilized. We won't ever build without automated technology again. So every conversion, every building that we're doing, we are using a touchless, keyless entry system. That has to be. What we found is that generally speaking, the market we can access is larger with it than without. So if you took, let's say, my facilities, which we close on Sunday, and then the rest of the week we're open. On Sunday, if you look across the board at all of our facilities in all our different states, the ones that have automated storage facilities, we always have rentals in. Where the other ones, we may have some reservations or 1 or 2, right? And we'll have like 8 rentals that day from one facility that's automated, and nobody's even there. So it opens us to access to more market, and it allows us to do so much more. And we just think it's the future. If you're building today and you're not putting in keyless entry systems, it's going to be the equivalent of you building a storage facility and not having a website. That's how we're all going to look at it in 10 years. And that's important for us to understand and look at the infrastructure because we're in this for the long haul, right? I'm not doing it one-off. I'm not doing it anywhere. We've invested millions into technology infrastructure into this industry. We sit on boards. I do speaking things, everything. I'm in this for the long run. This is my business. And when we're having that kind of view, I need to know what I'm doing today, how that's going to operate in 20 years from now. And you got to think in 20 years from now, 30 years from now, driverless cars, what's that look like? Right. And people say, oh, well, that's kind of like, longer. We have cities in the United States. It's like a perfect example is Phoenix. If you went to Phoenix, Arizona today and got a taxi, there may not be somebody in that. There's actually driverless cars operating. So driverless cars aren't coming, they're here. And they're already trying to test them at mass, right? So it's, and it's really big in semi-production. When we look at that though, they go, well, what does driverless cars have to do with storage? Well, I immediately think customers utilizing the facility don't utilize it without a car. That doesn't happen, right? It's not just getting there, but it's loading, it's unloading, it's carrying capacity, right? Maybe they use moving trucks. Well, what happens when moving trucks are automated? Do you have technology that can back into an Uber's back-end system that'll allow drivers to come to your facility? Because if not, your facility will no longer exist. Because if I'm moving with U-Haul and U-Haul has driverless trucks and I can't have a back-end technology system that works with that, then whoever's moving will never be able to use your facility. So we're thinking a lot about these things, and no matter what plays out, it doesn't matter. We know that the keyless entry system is not going anywhere. It's here to stay, and it is the norm. That also will allow us, though, to do other things, whatever may come. I need the flexibility to adjust with technology, social changes, and market changes. And that's really what a lot of this is about. It's about, if you're putting whatever, 5, 10, 15, 20 million into a building, right? 2 million into building a storage facility, and you're not building it for 10 years down the road, what are you doing spending that much money? That's insane, right? Like, and people are like, oh, it's going to cost $50,000. And I'm like, you're spending millions, but you're not going to spend $50,000 to have a competitive advantage and be relevant in 10 years. Like, it's not logical. But yet we're still seeing a lot of that. So that's kind of my views on automation. Yes, we're doing it. Yes, we're doing keyless technology. It will change. It will. And there's a lot of people that are running on it, that are doing a lot of things. We have the first generation of keyless technology. They don't even have it. It's actually, it's not generation 1, it's generation 0. So Travis and us, we have sister facilities. So they're twins. And the only reason they're twins is because the technology is the exact same. We were putting them in at the same time. And so that technology, they figured out everything that was wrong, and then they rolled out generation 1. So we literally have generation 0 of this technology. So trust me, it's going to change, but it all gets better. And to be built, be ready for that change.
That is absolutely fantastic. Do you know what? I think that there's a soundbite there. I think how passionate you are about keyless technology. And obviously, I did a debate against Travis about manless facilities. And my argument was, do you know what? What we need is we need both. We need to offer both. We need to give the customers a choice like we do in supermarkets in the UK. You can either go to a checkout or you can go manless. But I've had Travis back on the podcast, as you might know, a couple of weeks ago. I held my hand up and said, Travis, you was 100% right, because his words were to me when just a soundbite that I remember from Travis said to me, if you aren't planning for the future right now, in 10 years time, your self-storage will be irrelevant. And I always remember him saying that to me. And I was like, oh, and now I've completely...
I argue that it's irrelevant today.
Yes.
I think if you're building it and putting it, it's not irrelevant in the future. If you're in my market, you're irrelevant to a lot of my customers. You got to understand, 20% of my customers don't even come into my store. If I'm the only one that offers that, I get that entire market because there's nobody else. So to a segment of the market, if you're not building that out today, you're immediately irrelevant. And so it's we look at it as a competitive advantage, but I look at it as I'm just trying to be relevant today, not even for the future. It's right now when those doors open up. All it takes, could you imagine building one that doesn't have it, and then someone starts building one right down the street that does, and you open up within 6 months of each other, and you're going, I'm immediately at a disadvantage, and I just spent however many millions on this asset, and I'm already at a disadvantage. that would be frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving forward, AJ, to growth strategy, what is your growth strategy at the minute? Is it acquisition or is it opening new sites? On your podcast, I listened to it today, Self-Storage Income. Absolutely love that podcast, by the way. And it's one of my favorite podcasts I always listen to. You actually mentioned that it's 8 or 9 per capita that you look at for amount of square footage per capita. And that for me is incredible, because over here in the UK, obviously you are so far ahead of us in the US. And so you're saying that I will look at acquiring facilities or look at building facilities where it's 8 or 9 square foot per capita. In the UK, it's currently 0.7. My new build, we're less than 0.5 square foot per capita in this city where I'm building the Hull, where it's got over 300,000 people. Everything's trending in the right direction. The population, there's no there's no one big company that employs a big percentage of people. So moving forward, AJ, what is your strategy? Is it to continue to acquire, or is it the growth strategy that you're looking at to open buyer new builds?
So, the United States is really interesting. You mentioned that square footage. We have markets that have 30 plus square feet of storage per capita. 30 plus.
Wow.
So there are markets in the United States that are what I believe will end up being in a storage recession. And a lot of these markets aren't high growth markets. And this really makes me worried during inflationary periods of time. I think these kind of markets could get into big trouble, big trouble. So we're being very selective at this point in the cycle in the United States. I found a market that had 2 square feet per capita. I was shocked. I haven't ever seen that here. And I was like, we're building there. I mean, it was so unheard of, right? And almost always in the United States, if you have something that's low, there's reasons they won't let you build or something like that. But in the United States, we have tons of storage. And so when I'm looking, my plan is to acquire, to build, and convert. I'm so focused on the markets and understanding the demand and the revenue drivers of that individual market. Like, I will go across the entire flipping continent to go to a good market before I build close to home I will, we're going at much greater lengths than we used to ever go to because of this oversupply. And we're very concerned about future interest rates and the monetary influence of governments right now and how that's going to play out if we end up having a post-war Germany phase where we have hyperinflation. And, there's lots of arguments saying that won't happen or whatnot, but we've always heard it again. So I'm also benchmarking these assets' performance inflationary periods, because we already know that the government will do whatever they can or whatever they want to in deflationary times to make sure that the assets, right, or the money supply rises and that it waters it down. So I'm more concerned in untested period of time and not there isn't a lot of data on that, right? So there's not a lot of data out there showing how self-storage is going to do during inflation. When I look at that, what that tells me is that I think there's real risks for that. We need to be that much more careful on where we're putting it. So demand needs to be that much higher. And that's how I'm so-called hedging against this. So we're more strategic and we're more specific about our growth than we have been in years. 10 years ago, or not even 10 years ago, 5-6 years ago, you pretty much could have bought any storage facility and you would have won, right? It wouldn't have even mattered. I do not view that today. I pass up 9 out of 10 deals.
Wow.
I pass up hundreds of the extra supply in the United States and my fear of what will come because of it.
Yep. So what do you think is going to happen in 2021 then in the States in terms of self-storage? Are you still confident there's growth there, or are you playing a little more defense?
Well, I'll probably double my portfolio this year. I'm definitely confident that there's this year, but we're, like I said, we're going to grow a lot, but man, are we going to be strategic about it? I think that we're in unprecedented territories as far as the economy goes. For all intents and purposes, the United States has been socialized. Markets don't even perform without governments right now. They don't work. We rely for everything on the governments. They're bailing us out. They're sending us checks. They're supporting financial systems. They're everything, right? This is totally uncharted for us. In the United States, we've never seen anything like this. To understand how the government's going to back out of it now, we don't really quite know how the markets are going to work and react to that, or if they ever will. There's so many unknowns. There's just like in 2008, there were very clear steps. We have to support the banking system. We have to get loans out. We're going to do QEs, right? And we're going to take on balance sheets to the Fed, but then we're going to start selling off the assets immediately. We don't want to be involved in this. As of right now, it's open-ended. It's anything goes. We're going to keep printing. We're going to keep doing this stuff. And because of that, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. This is really important to understand. I don't time markets. I'm not a stock picker. I'm not anything else like that. So what I do is instead I get hyper-focused on the individual asset, its performance, and then the microeconomics around it. So I'm looking at individual companies. I'm looking at what the schools are like. I'm looking at all these kind of things relative to that location. Is it growing, and has it been growing for 2 decades, right? Or is it some weird trend that's going on from COVID? Because that's happening. So we're getting super micro about our analysis because we're so concerned about the macro. I don't know if that makes total sense.
AJ, that makes absolutely phenomenal sense. And I hear you on your podcast going through it and your criteria that you have. And so, yeah, that makes absolutely brilliant sense. Just quickly onto operations, if I may, just a couple of questions. Where do you advertise at the minute? Do you it's obviously intent based. So do you advertise primarily on Google? I know that when I talked to you previously, you was doing a lot of Facebook and Instagram ads. Where do you primarily advertise now?
For advertising, it really is mobile. So anything mobile, we're on. 80+% of our customers come from online. We don't really put any money hardly in anywhere else. It's almost irrelevant in our marketing strategy as far as total dollars spent. It's just, we get the location, and then we're strategically trying to acquire the customers that we know are high paying targets in the right time and bring them in. So our funnel is built around these paid ads through Google, Facebook, Instagram, all these other means at the top end. And then we're trying to create a good acquisition funnel down end through its qualifying to make sure we're getting the top customers and the best customers. And we're bringing in there and we're acquiring them at a lower cost. But the cost to acquire tenants have skyrocketed. So it's doubled in 3 years probably. It's just, it's getting more competitive, which is fine. And we can adjust for that and know that. But really the only effective dollar use, even though costs have gone up, is your online marketing. It's you get, for what you get for a buck is not comparable to any other marketing strategy. It's not. So that price can move way up, and it will. And it'll still be the most efficient type for a long time to come.
Yeah. So what we're doing, we're spending on Google because we've tried cold audience just in a radius of around the self-storage on Facebook, on Instagram, and we don't really get a bang for our buck on that. So what we do is, first of all, we go on Google, and the cost to acquire a customer is £106 on Google, but then we also retarget them as well. So we retarget them on Facebook and then Instagram to make sure that we basically pixel them. And once they come on to our website, get a quote, we know exactly where they are into that journey. And that's how we do it. Just quickly on your key performing indicators, what do you look at? Because you've got so many sites, you've got 13 sites. How do you keep on top of all those sites? Is there a specific key performing indicators you look at, or is it just revenue? Because I remember when you did the conference, it was revenue. And so what are your KPIs that you look at?
Yeah, we're just like you said, I'm obsessed with revenue. It's the name of the flipping game. When people start talking about other things, I'm like, just stop. What's the revenue? Where's the revenue potential? What are the revenue drivers and eroders, because this is based on a cap rate. The valuation is the only thing that matters. So the reason why I focus on this is there was a problem in self-storage where everybody talked about occupancy. So when I spoke at ISS, I spoke, kind of people were like, what are you talking about? And the name of my speech was occupancy doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter. I would take a facility at 40% occupied at $2 a square foot rates than a facility that's 100% occupied at 80-cent rates, a square foot rates. And by changing that metric in your mind, it completely changes the way you analyze and run your business. Like, what's the revenue coming in? Where are expense ratios coming in? What are expense drivers? How does that correlate with that revenue? So I look for drivers and eroders. What are the things that drive revenue and what are the things that erode revenue? And what are the things that drive expenses and what are the things that erode our expenses away? Obviously, those are inverse. You want one positive, one the negative. So we look at, a perfect example is the correlation between revenue and expenses is marketing, right? Your acquisition strategy. How much are you spending? How much are you getting? That comes in time value. What is the lifetime value of a tenant? They're not all the same. Some tenants have a much higher lifetime value than other tenants. And this is principally put together by two things. It's put together by, first and foremost, the length of stay and what you're charging, right? The basics. But it also looks at things like products, okay? Are they buying insurance, right? Are they doing these other things? Rate schedules, rate increases, and what are they storing and how much are they storing? So every single unit has its own demand, its own supply, its own customer. We don't look as a facility as a whole when I'm analyzing demand. I look at the units, not the facility. So when I look at a market and they say, oh, there's a lot of demand for storage, what demand? Is that 20 by 20s? Is that 5 by 5s? Is that indoor climate control? I mean, demand is a blank statement, makes no sense. If somebody says, yeah, I need storage, they don't need storage. They need a specific something. They need a 5 by 5. I need climate controlled wine storage. It's everything that they leave out that's the most important things. That's what's important. So when I look at a facility, I have 10 products. Who's buying these products? How much are they paying for these products? Forget the storage part. What can I get for selling a product and how much does it cost me to sell it? And that's really what I focus on. It's where in this dynamic of revenue and expense ratios. After that, and I really see potential things like that, then we're looking at the total cost of entering into the market, buying the facility, what is the debt and all that kind of stuff go on. But really, it's the revenue that matters. If I think that there's an eroding factor in the revenue from shrinking population or new supply, well, I don't need to look at the facility anymore. It's done, it's over, right? And if I see a lot of drivers of revenue in a certain facility, in a certain location, and I'm analyzing the tenants, what they're using, how much are they using, what they're paying for, on and on and on. I say, geez, there's a lot of revenue potential that's not being met in this market. Okay, well, how can we get into the market? What's the cost to enter? What do we have to buy, right? And how does that look on the expense ratio side? And if as long as you get that right, you'll be okay in good times and bad times. Because the equity is the mystical fairy thing that you put on a balance sheet. It doesn't matter. Can you pay your bills? How much are you taking home? That's what matters. Equity follows that, but it doesn't come, and I don't ever underwrite for it.
AJ, I absolutely love that. I could talk to you all day, buddy. Just two things before I go. I want everybody to get this book, Growing Wealth in Self-Storage. I call it the Storage Bible, buddy. It is fantastic. And people say I give away all my secrets because I literally tell you exactly how we're doing it on a Monday. I tell you my previous week conversions, how much money we spent on advertising, the conversion rates of move-ins to reservations, and you name it, I share it. But you've shared and mapped out your whole strategy in that book, which is just fantastic and phenomenal. And another thing, buddy, your podcast, you've got Cash Flow to Freedom, which is no longer Cash Flow to Freedom. It's the AJ Osborne Show. I absolutely love that. Listen to every episode. And Self-Storage Income. I think that every single person should listen to those podcasts and buy the book. If you could give one bit of advice to a storage owner, if he asked you, look, AJ, give us one bit of advice, what would it be?
For storage owners, it would be really understand what you need to focus on and what you don't. getting rid of some norms that you think of that you can't raise rates dramatically, that it's focus on the important things at that facility and basically ignore everything else. Because as long as you focus on the most important things, everything will come, right? So really, where is your revenue coming from? Okay. So what affects that revenue? And how do you start patching holes? How do you start patching leaks? And how do you start improving that? That changes the way you market, you run your facility, your processes, your systems, and your valuation just through that will explode. Literally make a checklist, prioritize everything that has to do with your valuation. So what's the most important thing to not? Get rid of everything except the top two, and then figure out everything from there and start patching it. So don't get overwhelmed. Don't get anything. Sit down, make a list. And I can already give you the top two. It's easy. Revenue is the number one. I really don't go beyond that. And then from there, start looking and analyzing your revenue like a business. And you're going to find out all these other weird things that your facility is going on in your facility that you didn't know about. And it'll all come together, right? It'll come together organically as you.
Oh, sorry, just cut out there, buddy. Yeah, I got 99% of that. AJ, thank you so much for your time, buddy. If people wanted to know more about you, where would they go?
Self-storage income. We've got the podcast, the website, or Instagram, AJ Osborne. I'm always posting updates and what we're doing and building, and just posted one today on a facility we're looking at. The head part of it was burned down. So yeah, self-storage income. You can email us, AJ Osborne on Instagram. You can literally DM me. I answer emails and DMs, and go to the podcast, Self-Storage Income.
Buddy, thank you so much for your time, mate. I massively appreciate you, buddy, and everything you do for this industry. So thank you once again for your time, and good luck with everything you've got going on. You sound like a busy man.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. I was looking forward to talking with you for a long time. So thanks.
Cheers.